Hey everybody, and welcome back to Some Like It Pop, a bi-weekly look at the latest happenings in pop culture. And oh, what a happening it's been in the past week. This is Bradley Stern, Editor-in-Chief of PopCrush.
I'm Samantha Vincenti, Managing Editor of PopCrush.
I'm Ali Zubiak, Associate Editor of PopCrush.
I'm Matt Donnelly, a Senior Writer at PopCrush.
And today we're joined, finally, by the last remaining editor who has not been regularly on this podcast.
Erica Russell.
Hey. Excellent.
Yay.
We're all here to share our feelings and emotions about the U.S. presidential election.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, you might not have heard, but so I think maybe the best way to kick this off is to talk about pop star responses to this, because I think one of the first things I saw was Lady Gaga standing on a sanitation truck holding a Love Trump's Hate sign. What notable pop star protests have we seen?
I was saying yesterday, and she's certainly a controversial one, but anytime I see someone like sort of putting their money where their mouth is, and when it comes to politics, I appreciate that. So in spite of Lena Dunham sort of like back and forth, and whether that strange pantsuit rap video she made was helpful or potentially detrimental.
It wasn't helpful.
Right.
I'll say it. I never thought it was, and I didn't think it then either.
I think
the Slack records will show.
Right.
I did not support that effort.
But I do think that the campaigning she's done and the essay she wrote was really nice. And I think calling Paul Ryan and telling and sharing her negative views on things and urging other people to do the same and call their congressional leaders, I think that's all very helpful and constructive.
It is.
It is as much as any American citizens is. I'm not quite sure. I have to be honest, and I do appreciate not just the efforts that certain celebrities are making, but even just as simple as expressing it. I was just talking to Ali about seeing Pretty Little Liar actor Keegan Allen talking about it and saying that he resolved to support the causes and do the work that he felt needed to be done over the next 4 years. And then when a follower tweeted a meme of Frozen, Let It Go, with his face over the different characters, then he was like, I'm never going to let it go. And I think that refusal to keep talking about and keep supporting things that they care about is great, like anyone else. That said, I think this election, everyone and everything piece and every person on Facebook is saying that the results of the election spoke to a chasm between two parts of America that you could loosely divide up into city and country. And what I think that we definitely kind of already knew even before the election as editors, or I certainly did from reading the comments of our readers, and a lot of our readers are, I don't want to use the term middle America because that sounds pejorative, I think, or I'm hesitant to use it because people hear it as pejorative, but I think people that we're not friends with in New York, I'll say, don't really care what celebrities think about politics, largely.
I think that was definitely proven.
I think they think they're outsiders and elitists, and it doesn't help. I'm not sure it helped.
I don't know that she could have gotten any more celebrities, in fact, between Beyonce, Jay-Z, Katy, Gaga, literally all of them, and yet, obviously, the outcome still was the same.
I also think a lot of the fan groups of the celebrities that were really campaigning for Hillary are not going to vote for her anyway.
Yeah.
True.
So
I think also at this point it's so critical to go. Of course, helps. Sorry. Of course, like calls to action on Twitter and Facebook are helpful to a certain extent, but I think this election proved that social media, if that's your exclusive means to sort of reach your audience, it's not going to do any good because, as we saw, your social media environment is sort of just your own opinion a lot of the times reflected back to you, and that was seen a lot of the time that there was this, the alt-right movement was sort of this dormant, community online, and they were never going to be persuaded by, this sort of more liberal ideals that they probably never even saw on the internet. So I think that's why this year it's so important and so critical for people in the public eye to go beyond social media and, really get out there and maybe stand on a sanitation truck, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway from this for a lot of people is that we've all cultivated safe spaces or bubbles around us on social media. And so every tweet that you see is, your particular leaning. And for a lot of people, obviously that was Hillary. And to be so gobsmacked and wrong because you just presumed from seeing all these things on social that everything was going your way is just proof that it truly is this very superficial, very limited view of the country as a whole. And a lot of people they're not tweeting, they're not, they're not on your feed. And if they are, a lot of people said in the months leading up to this, which as much as I almost did every time, unfollow me if you're supporting him. And what we've done is created this divide where you've filtered them out of your feed, and now you really don't get a glimpse of all these people who are probably voting for him quietly, and they're just not making as much noise. And so I think that's been probably the biggest takeaway is like social is not reality at all.
Oh yeah, definitely.
No.
So that's been very jarring. How has everyone been dealing with in the weeks of the aftermath or the days of the aftermath? Feels like weeks already.
It feels like
really
months.
It does.
Yeah.
I can't believe it was a week. Not even a week ago.
It wasn't even a week ago.
Yeah.
What are our coping mechanisms? Because for me, I'm finding it really difficult to.
If you say going to the gym, I'm gonna kill you.
I've just been gymming. Finding it really difficult to sign on anymore because, and it's not even because of my discontent with what happened and everything. It's just like you can't go on without some troubling news item coming out or somebody's protest Facebook speech, which they're all very good. All of the statuses are really good and impassioned, but it's like affecting my brain. I can't even I feel bad physically going online. So I wonder if anyone had any good escapes that they've been doing.
Honestly, no, because the problem for us, and not to be all woe is me about this job, but
right.
we can't avoid it the
Very
way
true.
some people can. If you
Very
work
true.
in, I don't know what people do. Like if you're a lawyer or
Graphic designer.
yeah, there are tons of
Doctor.
other jobs where you can. I wouldn't say you zone out completely, but we are faced with everything. I mean, I have written a Trump-related story, at least one every day since the election,
Absolutely.
barring the weekend. And yeah, it's true. Even if I'm just going on to Facebook, I can't go on to Facebook anymore.
No.
I just can't unless it's something work related. I refuse to go on the internet. Like this weekend, I was like, nope, can't do it because it drives you crazy after a while.
It
But
does.
I think that is your coping mechanism is when you have the time, get off Facebook. And I think that's super important.
It is real, but it's also hard because everyone I know only wants to talk about the election.
True.
Like
Right.
my mom will only talk about the election, which I completely understand. But I also just kind of don't want to deal with it, even though
Well,
I
I mean, and
no
also in
choice.
your defense, because what you just said, we do deal with it 40 to 60 hours a week.
Right.
And I wasn't very surprised by these election results. I spent the entire cycle telling people on Facebook and Twitter and to their faces that I was concerned this was going to happen because of our job and because we are slightly more attuned to the other half of America than a lot of our insular New York City friends are because we have to read the comment section. And I know that the most vocally racist and vocally, pointedly everything those are the loudest people. But I mean, yeah, it's like you really do have to shut that out if you work in media because you are forced to be on Facebook and forced to be on Twitter for your job.
One thing I thought about is everyone kept jokingly saying at one point that Trump kind of represented the comments section, but that almost told you what was going to happen during the election because that is the masses. Like if all of the comments are in that way or similar, everyone's joking he was the internet troll who won, but like that is the voice of the internet kind of. So it's almost not shocking. I mean, it's not shocking to me that it happened in the end, but it was, we kind of wrote it off as like, he's an egg on Twitter, but like that is more or less becoming the majority.
But you didn't get the popular vote.
But you didn't get the popular vote.
I think sort of understanding your anger and putting it in the correct context is the best thing you can do, because I think if you focus too much on how angry you are, that's obviously going to be your undoing. But if you sort of try to ignore it, then it'll eat you alive. And that's sort of been my thing to do every day, is sort of like wake up, not like an affirmation, it probably sounds like that, but just to like identify what you're angry about, spell it out in clear terms, even if it's just clear terms to yourself, and just say like, here's what I'm going to try to do to pragmatically address this moving forward, whether that's to volunteer for an organization that you care about, donate to something, just have an honest conversation with someone you might not typically have an honest conversation with. And that's just sort of what I've been trying to do, for better or worse.
That is the hardest one.
Yeah.
And today I just found out via an article that in my very liberal Brooklyn neighborhood, a woman was just punched in the face last weekend for talking poorly about Trump. And this is in a very, very liberal, insular place. Prior to the election, another reason I wasn't surprised was because when I was visiting Portland in October, I was also accosted by a racist Trump supporter who shouted, "Bring back Sharia law," in the face of my Indian American friend, who isn't Muslim, by the way.
Right.
And then just screamed "faggot" over and over again at my boyfriend. And I literally was trying to parse out the logic of this man in the "Make America Great" hat, and it didn't work.
There is no logic. That's
no,
why.
right. So that part is challenging, and both and yeah, I agree. Like, it's important to talk to people to their face, but sometimes you just really hit a wall, and that's what I'm trying to navigate right now. And I agree that, like, it gets to a point that stating your own anger to yourself is important, because it gets to the point where I like lose my verbal skills. I'm so frustrated.
Yeah.
Very true.
I think one encouraging thing, though, is that in spite of all of, looking at the statistics and the breakdown and the aftermath and all the very discouraging elements, one encouraging one was that young people seem to overwhelmingly be leaning more toward, I don't even want to say liberalism, but just like
towards caring
decency,
about people.
Yeah, decency and humanity and things of that nature. And I think that was one thing that felt, like I said, very encouraging to see.
The only problem with that for me is that I've noticed as people age, they tend to get more conservative.
Yeah,
so I wonder how long that'll actually last. I'm feeling very pessimistic about the world as
the
all
oldest
of us
person
are.
here. As the resident old. Samantha, the resident old. I will say, I do agree that people get a little more conservative. I would say that applies more to fiscal conservatism, because some people get a little bit of money and then they're like, taxes, this is an outrage, which is the only form of conservatism I can remotely wrap my brain around. Is not what, because I don't have that much money, but if, I guess I would be mad too if someone was trying to take half of it, even though I would do it. But yeah, it's just the world is so different than it was when the young people became more conservative before. I just feel like there's no precedent for this. So I don't know. There might not be a precedent for that.
I mean,
either.
I hope
there's no
that
precedent for
doesn't
any of
happen.
this. I mean, I don't think that there has been, since perhaps the dawn of American media, where, by the way, every newspaper, because that's the other thing, that objectivity is something we're all told to do, and obviously you need to be factually accurate, but when newspapers first started in America, they all had a rampant point of view. They all had conflicting, strong points of view and agendas. Like, that's not new. That's as old as newspapers and media. But I just feel like, there's no precedent. Now we're living in a place where there's news sites that now there's spreadsheets I'm seeing being circulated of newspapers and news sites to avoid, because they literally manufacture false information. And I've seen them bubble to the top of the Facebook trending algorithm.
The top search result, if you search election results, is a just incorrect number that has Trump with more popular votes than Clinton, which is just incorrect.
Literally
so
false.
Dangerous. There's this uprising and surge of hoax sites, and it's terrifying.
Well, going back to what Sam just said, I wanted to say something that I've been really struggling with has been knowing where to draw the line of protecting my mental health during this time and just not making myself sick over and over this, and keeping myself informed, because I mean, it's very difficult to kind of every day wade through all of the news and the information that is constantly being, regenerated on our feeds, and at the same time trying to just like get some sort of semblance of stepping away from it just to breathe a little bit. For instance, I really struggle with it's hard for me even just to watch that man talk. So with the 60 Minutes interview, I haven't watched it yet. I really don't want to watch it. It's hard to bring myself to watch it. At the same time, I feel like I have a responsibility to keep myself informed and know what he's saying, and if he's spewing lies, or if there's something that's important in there that I should hear as a citizen. So I think that's been kind of the thing I'm struggling with, is just knowing, or not knowing, but rather negotiating, where do I draw the line between, okay, I really need to look at this so I know what's going on, and I can't look at this because it's gonna make me just, jump out of a window. So that's something I'm struggling with.
And it's crazy the idea that to inform yourself with this party, you almost have to like willfully ignore facts. And that's the part that I'm also struggling with. It's like you want to understand a certain part of the electorate, but learning is almost like unlearning in this sense. It's like you have to let go of things you know. And it's like, what good am I doing myself to?
And
I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's driving me crazy. Yeah.
You're not going to win with facts either. I saw a good, and when this podcast goes up, I'm going to try to include a few resources that I saw online, but I remember one that was like kind of like guidelines for rhetoric engaging family members in the holidays. And one thing was that in the rhetoric model, facts won't work. You can state all of these facts about refugees or immigrants or whatnot, and it's not going to sway someone who's already decided. They read one thing that maybe wasn't right, wasn't correct factually, or they decided something, and that's not going to change their mind.
Yeah.
So you need to find like other paths.
Yeah, I've hit that wall because now you're presented with, I've had arguments with people in my life where I say, things like unemployment's gone down, and they've said the numbers are skewed because the government is skewing those facts. And at that point, that scares me a lot, because you can no longer have this discussion with someone if they're unwilling to say that the source material is legitimate or not. And then that really scares me, because it's like, okay, what are we going to have this discussion about? Like, if you feel that those numbers are cooked and I think that they're legitimate, we can't even have a debate, because that's the thing that they keep coming back to, is like the facts that you're being given are fake about climate change, about, the economy. And you're like, well, we can't even have a modern, like a normal discussion about this anymore, because we can't agree on data, which is, I don't know that this has ever happened, or at least to such a degree.
I don't think it has. And I mean, I voted in both. That's the other thing. People say this, you're a crybaby because your side lost and you're just sad. I voted in both Bush elections and was on the losing side of both. Yeah. And it was scary. And then, especially in the first term, 9/11 happened, and it was a terrifying time. And that entire time was also polarizing with some people I knew, but it was not the same unprecedented terror. For one thing, I mean, George Bush grew up in a political family and had some sort of vague grasp on what the duties of a president is, which
totally
we can't say
Trump
for the
doesn't
elect.
know.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think that's what scares us a lot, is that there is no experience there whatsoever. And
yeah.
It's not, that waking feeling every morning when you're like, what will he do? Because literally he has never been in any sort of position like this.
Didn't know he had to staff the West Wing.
Didn't know he had to staff the West Wing. Like, every day we find out a new thing that he's admitted, like, oh, I didn't know that was part of my duties. Now he's, debating whether or not he needs to be there full time because he'd rather be in Trump Tower. And it's just, I mean,
and he's aware of it. I don't know if it's, well, never mind. I'm not going to propagate things I don't know about, as we just mentioned.
Yeah, right.
So, cut that one short.
But like when I've gotten to the place where I'm favorably comparing George W. Bush.
Oh, yeah.
That's, again, unprecedented.
Yeah, like Jeb Bush seems like a dream right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Are you kidding?
Well, because I feel like I've also said, I think one of the major differences of the debates were, again, going back to facts and everything, but in 08 and 12, like we debated tax structure and, immigration policy, sure, but these debates were only about scandals. There were like 2 minutes of her actually laying out a plan and him just not having a plan. And that's it, because then you'd go right back to attacking each other about scandal, and it was purely sensational. And I think that was also very different for the first time. It was not about what the presidential debates should be about. I mean, granted, every time there's a debate, there's a scandal of some kind, but that really dominated this election, and you were kind of just basing it on hearsay a lot of time, and these reports from websites that may or may not be credible, which I think is new to this year. I don't think that was a thing in 2012 even. Like, Facebook wasn't at that point yet where there were bogus websites.
No.
Or at least not like proliferated the same way.
No. And so one of the major fingers being pointed this year is at Facebook directly, for them not taking more responsibility for shielding the general public from very clearly bogus websites, which is something I struggle with as far as their responsibility. Like, I inherently get it that they shouldn't have allowed those to float to the top, but they're also like a free service that like we willingly plug into. And is it really their job? it might be that Facebook is now defined as like a public service to the point where they should. But
yeah, that's the thing. And with any product, and I think this really especially applies to the tech realm, with any product, the intention of the product, and it also applies to pills and pharmaceuticals. The intention of a product becomes moot when you start to realize how the users are using it, and then there becomes a point where the user's use defines the purpose of the product. Facebook doesn't want to identify itself as a media company. Zuckerberg refuses to say that they're a media company, wants to, in my opinion, hide behind this, that we're a free service, that we're a tech service. They're more interested in commerce, whatnot. But the fact of the matter is 40%, and no, I cannot cite where I found this. Speaking of dubious news, but I've read it many times, guys. 40% of American adults get their news from Facebook now. That's dangerous. I mean, and I know Facebook, obviously, you can lead a horse to water, and Facebook is not forcing lazy Americans to just look at their feed as their only thing, but that's where we are.
And this is another encouraging thing, actually, that I saw in light of all this horror, is that immediately after Trump's sort of denouncing of the New York Times subscriptions went way up, there have been local paper subscriptions have gone up. And I don't know if that's any indicator that that's, overwhelmingly the whole population, investing in local news, or just maybe, the side that is angry that it lost. But either way, it's nice to see. And that, my friends from journalism school are excited about their career prospects when they sort of seem like in the toilet lately.
That is nice. I did not know that.
There's one good thing to come out of all this, I guess.
I'll say one of the things that has like really frustrated me about this entire process has been just kind of seeing these huge gaps in media literacy and information literacy, because that's so dangerous to me that people in my life that I'm close with get their news from memes. I mean, that's just frightening. Or even just reading a headline and that's your news. You're not getting any context. You're not checking sources. So I don't know. I feel like, there's not many silver linings, but in the future, something that I'd be interested in people kind of working harder towards is having media literacy really brought into, kindergarten through high school education, because this is our world now, right? We're getting all of this information minute by minute, screens right in front of us in our pockets. So if people aren't learning how to negotiate that really scares me big time.
I do think people have a general lack of critical thinking skills, and that education is partially to blame for that. I feel lucky that in high school, in like my public high school, for some reason, a lot of the teachers skewed lefty, and we had an anti-propaganda class, and I still apply rules that I learned then to now.
There's a headline floating around Facebook yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. I think it was the New Yorker. I'm not sure though. And it said this little known loophole could make Bernie Sanders president. So you click on it because you're like, this is outrageous, and it immediately says, no, that's not true. But you clicked on it, or like you believed it. A lot of people will comment on your status saying you believed it. Here are then it went into a lot of detail about how to be better at media and how to understand media, and that you shouldn't just listen to the headline. You should look at the source. I mean, it was actually a very helpful article about media literacy. And inevitably, I saw that shared quite a few times, and a lot of the comments were like, "Yeah," or like, "No, it'll never."
Oh my God.
But they didn't click. I mean, it was like shocking proof that even that little,
which we all know. Again, as people, as editors, like nobody reads below the proverbial fold.
Right.
People only read the headline.
Yeah, and that's really scary, and that's something that needs to be taught or understood, is that you can't do that anymore, because those sites that are those hoaxes are purposely creating shocking and fake headlines to get you to click, because you're creating ad revenue for them, and they're just people in like foreign countries creating those websites to like get ad sales. That's like crazy to think about, but they're actually manipulating our government just because they're like trying to make money for themselves. And
it'll be interesting to follow how this affects clickbait in general, clickbait of all kinds. We're all encouraged to write clicky, sticky headlines all the time. What happens next, you won't believe.
Yeah, and
the number three will surprise you.
Great idea.
Right, and I mean, obviously, even the most casual consumer is now savvy enough that they're kind of inured to a lot of those Upworthy type things anyway.
Yes.
But I'm curious to see what the next thing is. I'm very, very cynical, certainly at this point especially, and I am a little skeptical that everyone will suddenly have a ravenous appetite for long reads.
Yeah.
And read
Print
the entire
subscriptions.
Yeah, right.
But I hope so. I hope to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
I would like to know how the polling process is going to change in 4 years, because every poll said otherwise, and everyone was mad about the polls. I think, first of all, people turned to the polls and they were like, but the polls.
Right. They were mad at themselves for swallowing the polls whole.
Right. I don't know if that should just be,
I just think it's antiquated. It can't
Yeah.
possibly keep up with the technology of today, when people are, can dodge whatever they want to dodge, commit to, weighing in on whatever they want to commit to weighing in on. And I just think it can't really, I think Nate Silver said it all pretty well. It's like, I sort of kept this one stipulation that said Trump could be president for this reason, is because all of these other things could be debunked so easily.
It's also the idea of just trusting people to admit who they're going to vote for.
That's the big thing.
Yeah, I mean, people will lie. I saw some report on somewhere, and I don't remember where because I've seen so much news at this point. And someone was saying that if like a college educated sounding person calls someone and they're voting for Trump, and they hear the person on the phone and they think, oh, they're going to judge me if I say I'm voting for him, then they'll say I'll vote for Hillary. So you obviously can't base it on polls, because look what they did to us.
And humans are a mystery, and it's not anyone's business who anyone is voting for anyway. So, which I actually feel very strongly about. So I don't know. I just don't put stock. The fact that my anecdotal evidence, looking around and listening to humans or reading humans and talking to humans, and then I was shouted down by people who were like, but Nate Silver says. I mean, F that. I hope that everyone learned a lesson from that.
Yeah, it's kind of a lesson all around for everyone. I also think that it's profoundly important to remember that when somebody's in a voting booth, they're alone. There's nobody judging them. And they could be loudly vocal for Hillary and then just decide, you know what, maybe I mean, it's there that they make that decision. And that's why the polls are so antiquated at this point. Especially if you're being presented with them in person. Like, you're not going to, I bet no Trump supporter would be like vocally, because they feel scapegoated and they feel like they're the victim. I mean, that was the whole thing, like the forgotten man and woman that he tweeted as soon as he won. These people feel that they are being, underrepresented.
Or the single issue voters who literally just were anti-choice and knew that. Or
they were fiscal and they only voted on that. And I know that there were people
which we could debate how educated that was. Trump's been bankrupt many times. But
for sure. I don't think it does us any favors to blanket call everyone racist to vote for him. I think that's only gonna greaten the divide.
I mean, I wouldn't blanket call everyone racist. I would say everyone is complicit.
Yeah.
And I think I am troubled by the amount of all white people on my Facebook feed who are saying, okay, guys, calm down. Like, let's all just get over this, because it's often the people who aren't going to be effectively directed by any of this. And that's frustrating to hear. Yes, I agree. No one self-identifies as a racist unless they're in the KKK.
Like, I just don't think you'll get through to people. If you have any hope of getting through to people, I don't think starting with an insult will ever get you there. And not that I think we should be silent or stop protesting, but I just know that if you call someone dumb or if you call someone a racist, there's no way in hell you're going to even get them to consider your view. So I don't know. But right now, I totally get being angry and totally just saying screw them all. Like, I totally felt that and feel that still. But I just know that, like, ultimately, not that there's any rational, like, way to talk to these people at a certain level, but I don't
that's
think
the issue to me. I mean, people don't want to be called racist because they think that that's the worst thing in the world, is being called a racist instead of actually facing racism.
Right.
But I just can't be bothered to care about how they feel because they screwed over the entire country by voting for Trump. Also, I personally don't know any Trump supporters. Like, I don't know a single one, so I don't know how I would deal with having family members who voted for him, so it's very different for me.
Yeah, I agree. I lived a very insular life,
Yeah.
very insular blue state life, and then I went to Sarah Lawrence, and then I lived in San Francisco, and then I lived in Park Slope, Brooklyn. My family is very lefty. I'm sure I have some, distant relatives in Pennsylvania who probably did vote for Trump, but otherwise I have very rarely, and I'm not proud of it at all, and it's gotten me nowhere today, but in this respect, but I mean, I have a really short fuse when it comes to talking to people from that viewpoint, because I haven't really had to talk to people or hear that opinion very often.
Exactly.
It's beyond diplomacy at this point. It's like you have to be saintly to be able to engage with that type of.
And some people learn. Some people are really patient and are really good at it. I'm working on it, and I know I should work on it because it's not helpful to tune it all out. And I know that, and I'm waiting for the anger to pass so I can start doing, I'm protesting, I'm donating, but I'd like to do something more concrete that I know begins with talking a lot of the time. I just need to wait for some of the anger to pass.
Definitely agree. I think knowing quite a few Trump supporters from my background and in my Facebook feed and certain family, that it's caused me, I think that's why my reaction is like, you can't just call him a racist, because I've either tried it or led the argument with that, and I've seen where it's gone. But
you're also a much more emotionally measured, at least outwardly, person than I am.
Inside, I'm a mess.
That's what I know. That I know.
Yeah.
But I just mean like you present a much like more placid exterior that I think probably helps in those situations. Be our light, Bradley.
Yeah. Ultimately, I will guide the revolution against Trump.
But I did want to add one more thing. I've shared this on social media a couple times, but it was just a really, really great read, and it ties back to how you change hearts and minds, and it's not through logic. And it's a Washington Post who, by the way, Washington Post crushed it during the election, one of the few media outlets I am not mad at still, and who obviously they also spread the tape, the Access Hollywood tape from 2005. Right. But they wrote a long read called The White Flight of Derek Black. It's on the Washington Post, and it's about the son of a very popular white nationalist. He's also the godson of David Duke. And he grew up, even as a child, there were like news stories about him as like this child white nationalist who would be like, I hate N-word on TV. And he grew up to speak at rallies. And then he went to college, and he didn't tell anyone where he came from or what his he would sneak out and call into the white pride radio show he had with his dad, because they run a website. And then gradually people started finding out who he was and shunned him being college. And so then somebody who ran the local like Jewish organization on campus, Shabbat, like invited him to a Sabbath dinner, and a lot of people didn't go because they were like, screw this guy, but he went. And then he just kept going, and then people eventually came back to it, and they had dinner with him, and he met all of these people that he had never even encountered in his entire life, of different races and Jewish people. And he literally never spoke, and I think that is a huge problem here.
Absolutely.
With a lot of America. He had literally never spoken to and related to someone who wasn't like him. And he eventually evolved his position. I don't know where he stands exactly now, but he effectively told his father ultimately that he denounced white nationalism. And completely, it just came from talking to other people.
That's ultimately what it
like
comes
him.
down to, and that's what it is so much for homophobia, racial tension it's just ignorance in the sense of not actually knowing somebody who is like that. And I was talking to somebody from South Dakota who just moved here recently, and he was talking about how obviously it was very heavily Trump, and it kind of just came from a place of like complete, not innocent ignorance, but you just you can't really. They're not thinking about those issues because there's maybe nobody that looks like that or is that in their town. And so how can, I mean, it is racist, of course, but it's like it's just ignorance more.
A lot of people don't even realize that's what it is. Yeah,
it's not like they have like actively hateful feelings toward these people. They're just not educated in a way.
And I think especially like shows, I'm thinking of very special episodes of like Growing Pains or even reruns of like that show What's Happening. I can think of specific very special episodes of shows or movies like The Help, where it was like an episode about racism. Like Kirk Cameron worked at a convenience store and Dick Van Patten was his manager, and then like Kirk spilled something and he blamed it on the black coworker, and that's who was like, that guy's racist. And that's the episode we learned about racism. And I think it has painted this all of these things that you watch and you feel better watching the racist on that show being like, I'm not like that. I would never be like that. That's really racist. I'm glad I'm evolved. I feel like we've cartoonified the racist as this sort of like evil, very cartoonish figure.
Agreed.
And it makes discussions or even using that word racist hard, because it seems like you're putting a scarlet letter on someone, just even saying the R word.
Yeah.
And that shuts down the conversation.
Yeah. We've totally polarized, and I mean, obviously the parties are incredibly extreme now. It's not, fiscal debates that it once was. Now it's literally you're a racist or you're a wild liberal. Like, it's not.
Which a lot of it stemmed from this election because of the rhetoric Donald Trump used his entire campaign based on, I mean, not even just racism, sexism, xenophobia. I mean, everything he said. Yeah. I'm just like, I've been so quiet for this entire podcast more than usual because, like,
we've noticed.
I am so angry and you guys are being so diplomatic that I feel like I can't even.
Oh, no, I'm so angry.
No, I know you guys are angry too.
Yeah.
But I mean, I get
I'm
so
angry that you don't think I'm angry, Allie.
That, like, my hands start shaking and I just, like, I get really crazy.
It really is like Kubler-Ross stages of grief, except I'm really only anger and sadness right now. There's not even any bargaining.
Yeah.
Definitely not acceptance.
Yeah.
No.
But yeah, it's mostly just anger and sadness. But it cannot, there's no way. I mean, just thinking of actual deaths that and this does feel like a death in some ways. Yeah. Thinking of actual deaths that I've grieved from. I mean, I know it doesn't last forever, but it hasn't even started.
I know, that's the worst part.
And I guess the thing that everyone keeps tweeting, which is true, is like, hold on to the idea that this is not normal and don't normalize it and don't just, I mean, we are all getting on with our jobs, which is really feels so strange to write about non-related things.
Yeah, this election really put everything into perspective for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Writing about celebrities.
Yeah.
And I hope that's the case for everybody.
True.
Yeah.
I hope. And I will say another thing, going back to the issue of celebrities endorsing, I mean, because we made at popcrush.com, we made a 25 celebrity supporters of Donald Trump, and then 25 celebrity supporters of Hillary Rodham Clinton, of which that was just 25 of many. And then the 25 celebrities for Trump were like Scott Baio and Azalea. I'm just talking like this so people will listen to me, Banks. Yeah. And I do think there is the knee-jerk thing to say, oh, they're Hollywood liberals, they're removed from everyday concerns. How dare they espouse their views? And while some celebrities to varying degrees did annoy me in their narcissistic efforts, Lena Dunham, I will also offer the counter position that a lot of celebrities, people like Katy Perry, tour the world all the time. They've seen things that I've never seen. They've talked to people in other countries I've never been to. And so, yeah, I do think they have a little bit more perspective just from, yes, I know it's like an elite, top tier, very curated experience of other parts of the country, but they have seen more of the world. And I don't know, I don't think they're smarter than the average person at all, but I don't think that should be discounted either.
Agreed. I don't know. I don't think a lot of people really take that into consideration. I think they think they're Hollywood brainwashed celebrities. I don't think they have that. I mean, that is a great perspective. You don't really think about the fact that they meet tons of people.
Right. Of like, all kinds of people. Yeah.
And can I just say,
just flint the microphone over.
That because you brought up Katy Perry, that as problematic as she can be, I was really impressed with her and her efforts around this election. And even more so, I was really impressed. I guess, was it over the weekend that she donated to Planned Parenthood? Yeah, I thought that was great. And I thought that was showing people something tangible you can do. And also, I loved that she came out with her story about why she made it relative, right? And she humanized it. And I hope that her narrative and her story with, how Planned Parenthood was important to her and, why it's so important for so many women and so many people. I hope that maybe somewhere out there was read by a young girl who just didn't know what Planned Parenthood was and didn't know why it was so important. And I don't know, I thought that was really great, and I was really impressed by her kind of helping take the stigma a little bit off of it, because I do kind of feel like there are probably a lot of middle America people out there who just don't know what it is. They just hear Planned Parenthood and they think baby killers. And I think that's so tragic because it's just such an amazing organization for so many people. So yeah, that really impressed me.
There's baby killers, and then there's the new thing with Beyonce, which is cop killers, and that was almost like a foreshadowing of the election. When she performed at the Country Music Awards, the comments were incredibly vicious, and there was just this general cop killer mantra, which stemmed from the Formation video, which the alt-right decided to interpret as anti-police, and they've run with that, and her performance at the Super Bowl as well, the like Black Panther's imagery, and they've totally like made it so much more than what it was, and made it aggressive and made it violent, which it never was.
Which is also funny because Beyonce said blatantly that she's not anti-cop. Right after that whole thing happened. But
absolutely.
People don't care. They don't want to listen.
Hear that. Yeah, no, they've heard the rhetoric, and they've seen the headline on their fake news site, and they've like, they've really, this has been ingrained in their brains. So that was almost kind of a foreshadowing of how the election was going to go for me, because once I saw that her way of protesting was interpreted as violent, I was like, oh, then the country is in a lot of trouble if this is, being taken as anti-America, anti-cops. And I mean,
especially as a Black woman doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, who was it? CNN Van Jones said that this was a white lash against 8 years of Obama's presidency. And I absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, of course it is.
And like, I don't think...
Paired with misogyny.
Strongly.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's
combination.
discussed enough either. But I do think we got gobsmacked by the fact that much of America, again, not all of the voting public, because she did get the majority vote, but they just weren't ready to follow a Black president with a woman president. That just like a sizable chunk of America couldn't wrap their minds around that, which I experienced on the liberal side as well with the Bernie bro friends of mine who, and that's great. Lots of people supported him in the primaries, but then it got very vitriolic when I started publicly supporting Hillary Clinton, and I would get attacked on Facebook by the Bernie and third party voters. And then when I would ask them, this happened several times, I would ask them to name an alternate woman candidate that they feel would be better equipped to run for president. And they could not a single person I asked could name one. Period. A woman. That's 51% of the American population.
Right.
I couldn't talk to one person who could name me someone besides Hillary Clinton who could be president of the United States.
We have a lot
when
of
I think
work
about
to
that
do.
too much, it kind of like knocks me down and I need to lie down.
Yeah. I mean, when you kind of like take into the grand scheme and the big picture, it kind of becomes overwhelming, and that's when I have to log off because it just feels like there's so much work to do. That's what the thing that keeps playing in my head is just there's work to do. And
it feels more like it's not even work to me. It's like fighting.
Yeah.
Fight.
I mean,
it is.
Which is like heavier.
It is heavier.
And worse.
Yes. And it's definitely going to feel heavy for a while, and it's definitely going to be a lot of fighting. And I mean, I feel like the protests have been super peaceful despite what they're, trying to say on the other side. There's plenty of videos of them, shaking hands with cops as they peacefully protest, which is exactly...
The police were perfectly fine. They're completely fine on Saturday,
And obviously I hope that the rash of racial and hate crime, reports lessens, but I feel like this is very similar to Brexit, which is what that sparked. Like, there were weeks of that kind of violence because of that vote, where there was sort of like an unofficial okay to the public to act a fool.
Preceded by complete complacency.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yes. Brexit was totally the true...
I mean, again,
sign of what was to come.
people dismissed me as alarmist when I Facebook statused about that, but yeah.
I was hoping Brexit would be a wake-up call, but that's
no.
That's definitely hoping too much of the American people.
Yeah, in fact, it was a warning sign.
I mean, I answered the phone for a Quinnipiac poll the other day and did the whole 15-minute poll, which I never thought I would do. But I was so frustrated, it actually felt good to be like, yes, no, I did vote for Hillary. Just anger polling.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to do what we have to do to feel okay right now, I suppose.
I wonder how long it'll be before we actually feel okay.
I genuinely wonder that.
I think that every morning when I wake up, I'm like, wait, it's still terrible. It still feels like a breakup or death.
Yep.
It really does feel. I felt really stupid because my first thought of this was that it feels like the worst breakup ever because you wake up the next morning and you forget for a second that it happened.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait a second, it did. And then I read through our past Slack convo when I hadn't been signed on, and Bradley had said the same thing. I was like, thank God I'm not alone in this feeling.
Yeah, you have to replay it in your head.
Yeah.
With
It's
added
horrible.
information every
and
time.
it's so much worse. Like,
Right.
ugh.
It would be like, I mean, or I said, like, I felt like when my mom died and I would wake up right after and I would remember, like, in the morning, be like, oh, my mom's dead.
Right. You
But
briefly.
it's like that, except also it would be like if my entire Facebook feed was like, stop being so upset, your mom's dead 4 days later. And then also, your mom was kind of an asshole anyway. And then, what you need to understand about your mom is you didn't understand your mom. Read about the rest of your mom.
Yeah, it
This is a very
super
broad Mom
insulting.
America thing, but apparently, but yeah. My point is, it sucks, and I don't know when we'll be happier
It
again.
does suck. I told
does
you guys
suck.
I had a dream the other night that the KKK was outside of my house trying to like storm it, and
I was gonna
it was
tell
like
you.
Crystal Knocked all over again, but an updated version. Like
I was
that
going to tell
is
you I had that nightmare last night. I'm
my
not
God, did
kidding.
you really?
Yeah, because also I don't want to say exactly where I live, but I live in a very politically active area.
I live at 55th.
And there are protests there often through the year anyway. But so I kind of just, I think, implanted that visual, but with the KKK. And I was like,
oh God.
yeah, but I think everyone's having night terrors.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I woke up in a cold sweat from that.
Yeah.
It was, and I still think like I can still see the images in my head pretty clearly.
Yeah.
So
And I was at the Javits that night, of course, expecting it to be one of the best nights of my life, and of course, it did not work out that way. And I still see that a lot in my head.
For
How
the
late
record, I
did
told
you
you not to
stay?
go.
That's true.
Everyone here told me
for
not
the
to.
record, we all told you not to go.
I didn't, but I probably should. But how long did you stay?
A few hours, and then I was just stupidly keeping up with the New York Times tracker. And then when I saw its first like initial descent, I was just like, no, I know which way this is going.
I will say that I went to my aunt's house who is a very liberal feminist and awesome and taught me good things growing up. But went over there for a little celebration, and we started off with a bottle of fancy champagne, and then there was a second bottle of fancy champagne that was supposed to get popped when a certain awesome thing happened that never happened. So it just didn't end well, and I ended up driving home sobbing and went to bed shaking, and then woke up and just kind of, it was so weird the next day. Like, didn't you guys just feel like you were in a complete daze?
Yes.
Yes.
And like, did you guys feel sick? Because I
Yes.
was completely.
I
Oh,
was
yeah.
crying most of the day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
mean,
deflating.
Fortunately, none of us had to be in the office
Yes, that
the
was
next
very
day
fortunate.
because I didn't. And I texted Bradley. First of all, I went to my local bar with a bunch of my friends in the neighborhood. And then once it became apparent the way things were definitely going, I got blackout drunk on whiskey. I do remember going home, but then I don't remember falling asleep. And then I woke up at 5 a.m. And I was like, maybe it was a dream. And I ran to my phone,
man.
and then
That's
I
the
learned
first-
it all over
That's
again.
brutal.
And then I texted Bradley at like 6 a.m. like, I don't know if I can work today. I really don't know if I can work
honestly
today.
say, I know people say like that they thought maybe it was a dream. This is the first time I woke up that morning and I legitimately thought maybe it was a dream. I've never actually had that feeling.
I didn't think that. I woke up and I immediately started crying. Like
I just couldn't fall
immediately.
asleep. I slept for an hour that night.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I only
that
slept for
sounds
about
right.
2 hours.
My best friend who lives downstairs did that. She just stayed up all night. And, although she did go into the city that day and said it was completely quiet, but that on the train strangers were hugging each other.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
so
felt
I
like a
heard that
bomb
from
went
my
off down
friends.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
One of the worst parts also for me was just my mom's disappointment because she told me, she was like, I was so looking forward to celebrating our first woman president with you. I had all these images in my head of how it was going to turn out. And then she was just reduced to tears. And seeing your parents cry is one of the worst. I
It's
mean,
the
my mom
worst,
cries
yeah.
at everything. She's very emotional. But this wasn't like crying at a Disney movie. This was just like this really deep sadness, and I was crying too, so we were just both hysterical. It was horrible.
And the frustrating part is, and I know this is really sounding like we're self-pitying, it's not being a crybaby that my side lost. I mean, yes, I am decimated again that no one wants, or that a lot of America can't cope with the idea of a female president, but I was worried for other people.
Oh, yeah.
More than anything else.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
the common sadness, is fear if you were part of a group that might be really affected by this through legislation.
In
but
which case, literally everyone here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it's terror on behalf of other people that I love.
Well, I want to add that it's a very childish perspective to have. If you think that the people reacting right now are reacting the way they are because they lost, this is not the Super Bowl. It's not a football game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if I win or lose. This isn't about ego. These are lives and values and ideals that, you know, things are different now. And it's, I'm like trying to say this without crying actually, but it's like, this isn't about, oh, your side lost, you're being a crybaby, you're being a sore loser. If that's your perception of what this is, your perception's warped. And maybe that's how you would react, but that's not what this is. So that's my message for anyone who thinks that we're being crybabies.
I was going to say, in my unusual sort of streak of like Twitter militant behavior, I wrote
your
that,
Twitter's been great.
I'm loving it.
Real
I'm
militant.
loving
You should
it.
tweet
Matt.
more.
You never tweet.
I know.
Yes.
That just
Keep it
awakened
up.
something in me. I said, if you can sort of like look at a depressed Clinton voter and even conceive of mocking them, then you have never sincerely faced fear or like confronted fear or danger.
And I never mocked, like, you know, like people who, I never mocked John McCain supporters.
No.
I
Yeah,
never
that's
mocked
exactly.
Mitt Romney supporters. Like, I never was like, ha ha. That's absurd to me.
No, it's just a very different. This is
Yeah.
completely different.
The election was not about basic human decency. So
Yeah.
that's, you know, it just went way skewed. Anyway, I would like to at least leave on the positive note that it is very heartening to see all the protesters and the unification of so many different people of all different walks of life, you know, coming together to basically to all say that, you know, this is not okay and that we don't accept it. Regardless of what happens, I think I've found comfort in seeing people unite for that reason, and I can only, you know, put faith in that. It's that, you know, even though she lost, there are plenty of voices that are not okay with it, and you don't feel as alone in that sense. And she won the popular vote.
And 2 years until local elections.
Yes.
2 years.
That's right.
Not 4.
People keep saying, oh, at least it's, you know, it's 4 years. Like, no, you can do local elections. You can do, obviously, the Senate's opening up 2 years. Like,
I mean, if the world is even still here in 2 years.
True. Very true. Thank you for ending on that positive note. All right, I guess we'll wrap here on the question of our existence. But if we are here, you know, make sure to follow us on PopCrush.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, and a very happy Thanksgiving. We will return after Thanksgiving.
Next time we'll talk about Gilmore Girls.
Next time we'll be talking about
Gilmore
And we'll
Girls.
escape into their imaginary town in Connecticut,
Yeah.
which is apparently a real town.
Allegedly.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Good luck.
Good night.